we have a very highly esteemed guest joining us today. Her name is Genevieve Leveille. She's the CEO of AgriLedger. And this company, this blockchain company, is making some serious inroads in agriculture and supply chain management. So, Genevieve, I'd like to just introduce you and like you to say hi to everybody.
Hey everybody, I'm Genevieve, and nice to meet all of you, those I can see and those I cannot see. It's lovely to be here with you guys today.
Yeah. And 2021 has been such a consequential year in blockchain technology, especially where we've seen kind of the logical conclusion of, I think, a lot of policies in the world. And if you look at whether it's the global financial sector, if you look at even agriculture, which is what your blockchain is specializing in, sustainability is going to be one of the major tools that is going to, I think, further advance our society for the better. And I think going forward, really most of the solutions are going to be coming from tech entrepreneurs such as yourself. And, I always say this to people, I don't think a lot of these solutions are going to come from Wall Street, and they're not going to come from DC, and they're not going to come from Downing Street, and they're not going to come from The Hague or the EU based in Belgium. So I want to know about AgriLedger. Now, I read up about your company. I think it is wonderful, the work that you are doing in Haiti, to say the least. And of course, I want to leave room for you to talk about it as well, but I'm very excited about your project. So I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about your background and what inspired you to go forward and create AgriLedger, which I think is incredible. So
Yeah,
floor is
so
yours.
thank you so much. Actually, I'm a reform banker, financier person. But I really didn't. I have to say, it's just I worked in the bank, and I made money flow easier. And I've worked for the likes. And actually, I should go back a little bit, which just says I worked in technology in the 90s, and I was not surprised getting the vaccine so fast, because in 92 I was working cancer research, and they came out with
Wow.
Taxol, which was a
Yes.
drug for ovarian cancer. And also I got to play. I mean really play. We were digitizing images and sending cancer cell images across the internet to have diagnostic done from New York to Palermo, Italy. So it
Wow.
was slow and it was difficult, but that's kind of gives you. I've always been on the bleeding edge. And when I worked in financial services, it was about looking at processes. What can we change? What can we get everybody to agree will still stay on paper? And how do you inject technology into it? So that
Yeah.
was really when I discovered. So in 2015, I went into digital identity. I was now starting to work with Identrust, and they asked me the first day, "Could you go to South Africa?" And in
Wow.
that room, they were the first seven employee of Corda. You had Jed from what's it called, from Stellar. And it was
Wow.
really about how it was seminal for me, because it was really, how could you use this new technology not to do financial, but to actually do financial inclusion with young girls between the age of 13 to 16 who wanted to be able to buy music. Oh, and by the way, yeah, they need healthcare and all these other things. But more than anything else, we forget that the 16-year-old is the influencer in the house. And that means through being able to have this now, this new technology, mother or father who had the Shabin or the would actually use me, even though, and that was my mistake. I really didn't understand the token and wasn't interested in the token. So I could have had Stellar at the beginning, but
Right.
I saw straight through processing. And then I thought, if I'm going to go into this, I needed to go where something I was passionate about
Right.
and something that would be easy to explain. Because what happens is that food, so I thought two passion, food and traveling. Traveling
And
is a
that's
bit
definitely one of
hard.
our passions, food.
Yeah, with a name like Pina.
Right.
No, but what I thought is that you can't explain money to people who don't have money.
That's very
You
good.
can't
Yeah,
explain
that's very
traveling to
profound.
people who cannot do traveling. You don't have to like food. You have to eat to survive. So therefore, when you're trying to explain something in this kind of technology, everybody at some point, unless they're really, really lucky, has felt hunger, has been sick from food, or has seen others who are lacking food. And when we look at the amount of waste, you know, about 40% and of like there's about in sorry, I forget, it's about 40% of the people who get sick from food poisoning, children under the age of 5, are dying from that, which means they're dying under the age of 5, which means how many years are we losing? So those kind of things are some of the societal effect. But then we look at the other side, which is when we buy that cup of coffee, we all know that the farmer who grew the beans most likely is not getting a fair share. So this technology brings in that aspect, and it's not just a sustainability in terms of social responsibility, but even in the ESG, the governance aspect. I was actually speaking to someone today, and I was explaining why blockchain is great for governance. I don't think we have spent a lot of time around that so far. And part of that, I think, it was because of the fiasco of 2016 with the DAO. The DAO got a bad name as a result of the heist with Ethereum. This whole like DAO, because if you build blockchains, parties meeting, and where people are forgetting is the technology does not run itself. People run the technology. So unless you have governance as part of the rules and regulation of how the system functions, then you risk one party taking over or one party having more power than the other. So I think this really EG, and there is an opportunity really with this technology to make a difference.
Absolutely. And when you created AgriLedger, many of your accomplishments applying this technology, especially as your project went live in 2020, was based in Haiti. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your journey regarding Haiti and the application of this technology. And and especially because this is 2021, Haiti is very, very much relevant and at the center of focus on many things right now.
Yeah.
And I would like to hear about some of your journey there and why, and what were some of the challenges you faced, and what were some of maybe your proudest moments?
So what happens is that 2018 is when we got the contract. November 2018 also was the startup of the flare-ups in Haiti. Some of you may
Right.
now have heard about the whole aspect of Petrocaribe. So that was when Venezuela started imploding itself and started going back to everybody and saying, "Can I get my money back?" What Venezuela had done was to say if you owed them $1, you kept 30 cents that you could then use to build your infrastructure projects. Unfortunately, Haiti did not use the money for that, and
Oh,
money disappeared. Now, when the Venezuela started knocking at the door, the people started hearing, oh, there was money. Unfortunately, the ex president had some of his companies which had been involved in a contract and something like that. And also, the previous administration had been implicated. So, therefore,
hmm.
first of all, his mandate wasn't so strong because a lot of people thought that he had overstayed or really he was, I have to say, he was trying to make change happen in a very difficult way and going after people who were very strong. And
Okay.
so they would pay the gangs to go and basically protest. So 2018, it started going into lockdown. So the world locked down is nothing new to Haiti. They're like, okay, we're on lockdown today. We stay home. They've been on
Right.
lockdown since 2018. And then in 2019, September, they went in complete lockdown until January 2020. So what happened is that we were supposed to deliver in September 2019, but there was no way to actually go on the floor in the country. So what we ended up doing, this is where training by Zoom, building by Zoom, review by Zoom was done.
Right.
So we would have sessions after sessions of basically going on the step and making changes based on that. And finally, in February 2020, they had the first, and it was very funny because they said to me, "We have the stickers. We need to put them on the pineapple. What do we do?" And I had happened to be
Yes.
in 2019 in June in Malaysia, and I had seen, you go around, you start taking fruit pictures everywhere, and I had taken
Right.
picture of the fruit
Right.
tag, and I sent it to them, and I have the best picture. They took, cellophane tape and wrapped it around
Right.
the pineapple and stuck the thing on top. But and then also
Oh,
you have
very nice.
my best picture is you have the agronomist going up the mountain, being followed by 5 women who are going to harvest the pineapple, which we're going to make it, and then pictures of the truck. So it
Oh,
has
wow.
been, and it has been a journey. Actually, I mean, I'm telling you, 2020, I don't know, I don't know. I was supposed to in March be in Haiti, in UAE, in Africa, and then have a go live. And then COVID said, no, none of that is going on.
Oh.
And so we did the pilot in February, and then we did some changes to the system. I think we've changed the system 3 or 4 times already, but it's for the better in reality. The ask was for a fresh fruit value chain. So what they did is this started before us. And actually blockchain was somebody saying, hey, should we look at blockchain? And because the idea was, how do you create a system where no one is the owner, and you can then that means that information about how much has been paid, how much has been received, cannot be
Sure.
altered by anyone else. So it was like they had been meeting for about 7 years, and they had gone to everywhere around the world to see how markets work, because the idea is really moving agriculture to an open market. Because right now what happens is that farmers have people who come in and buy for them. It can be buying at somewhat of buy this tree from you, and everything in the tree will belong to me. And so that person gets 150, but the 600, 700 for the person in town. But what happens, and I don't know, Adam, I think you probably, if you go down the street from you and you go to a Whole Food and you smell this mango, which is really beautiful smell. It's usually the mango francis, the Haitian mango. That
Oh,
mango, yeah, so that mango sells for almost $5 one. If you're lucky, you can get on sale for 2 for 5 when it's the high season.
sure.
And you can only bring it in the US between the months of March to the end of July, because of
Wow.
the restriction, which means the demand is only met at about 40%. Meanwhile, the farmer in country is receiving between 7 cents to 14 cents a kilo, depending on the.
Oh.
And now, when it actually gets sold onto the foreign market, it's about 250 a kilo, when what we're paying is probably about 30 a kilo. It
Right.
makes sense, but because you have transportation, the store has to keep certain costs and things like
Sure.
that. but still that differential is so huge. So when you're looking at a mango of $3, the farmer was getting maybe 2% of that. Now, with the system in place, it's not so much it's a system, but it's also systematic change on how people behave.
Sure.
Because what you're doing is you're basically taking the risk. So we always like to talk the middleman is bad. The middleman is the one with the biggest risk. He has a risk to the people he's buying from, and he's got a risk to the people who are buying from him. So he's got risk to market and he's got risk to supplier, which means that he's got to hedge his bet and he needs to get it as cheap as possible over there and as expensive on the other side in case he
Right.
misses any sales. Now, if you start moving it to where you put quality on the level of the farmer, because the farmer doesn't mind having quality, he knows what quality is, but if he's not getting a fair price for his quality, he's going to give you shit. He's going to give you what he can.
Right.
Because he's getting so little, he might as well. But now,
Right.
if you change it where he is the owner, he's getting a service. So now think about Uberizing the supply chain. So a service provider, logistics service provider, who has to make sure it's kept cold, make sure that it's not diseased, make sure it gets properly done and passes all the certification, and they get paid for that.
Yes.
They no longer have to fund the farmer. They no longer buy from the farmer. They had somebody wasn't going to buy it from them, or it would take them longer. Imagine,
Sure.
which means they were at loss. Now, what that does is that it reduces the amount that they can make, technically, but in other way, it also greatly reduces your risk. So what we
Wow.
did is we created this, still using a broker to basically do the sell, and because we are in a environment where people trust somebody else to do, I'm buying
Right.
it from here, so the suppliers, and getting it to that. But then the next thing that was a challenge is I can follow, but where's the money? So what you
Right.
need to do is to make sure that the money is delivered to everybody and to everybody at the same time. So if we had a trail to where Adam gets paid, I might go, you know what? Give me my money now. I don't want to get middle of 5 days. But if I know that we're all going to get paid, and even if my part is smaller, but I'm going to get it, and I'm not going to be waiting for you guys to pay Bethany before she pays me, then I'm fine. So with the farmers, also I should say with the Haitian farmers, and what we did is you don't need to have a smartphone, because I realize I never go and look at my bank account unless I'm expecting somebody to send me money. So nowadays I don't even need to, because I get a
Right.
message telling me money was just deposited into you just received some money. So if you can have those kind of things, what we do is we actually send them SMS. We send them an SMS when they are supposed to bring their stuff. We
Right.
send them an SMS on what they have delivered. And by the way, the contract changes now. They are saying, I give you the right to carry my stuff. I give you, AgriLedger, the right to carry my data and to get my personal data. And I give the right to the bank to pay everybody on my behalf. So you're changing the way. But also what you're doing is you're giving them transparency as to all the costs in the value chain. So if the cost of transportation is borne by the product, you then also start doing a cost of goods sold rather
Sure.
than trying to understand. So then when we did this last year, I was surprised. I was expecting 30%, an increase of 30%.
Sure.
It ended up being an increase from 2% to 68%, so a
Wow.
750% increase.
That is
And
that
it's
incredible.
just it's just mathematics, because no one is actually funding this or getting in the middle and taking a low piece here and there. So everybody's cost. So if your cost is high, that's fine, but at least I know what your cost is. I don't have to guess. And also, usually what would happen is like I might worry that I'm entrusting, let's say, Bethany to go sell it for me. And the price that she tells me is not the price she really got. And she tells me a price because I don't have visibility to it. So part of what we do is we say, somebody has been found, and this is how much money you're going to receive bank account.
Wow.
So it gives that whole transparency. Now, what that does is also, now what we're flipping it to say is, brands, do you know how much your suppliers are getting paid? Because you know how much you're paying your suppliers. But
Sure.
as we, after COVID, one of the big things, like if we look at Chipotle talked about paying their employees fair, and they went to $15 an hour.
Right.
But do they know the chicken farm? Is he getting enough to survive? And that's
Yeah,
in
that's very good
studies.
points.
So this is, I mean, if I don't know if you ever seen the John Oliver piece on chicken farming. It's really, really bad. There was something from
No, I haven't, but I
2016.
do watch a show though, so I'll have to check that one out.
Yeah, uh, that one is very, very sad and funny. It's John Oliver,
Right.
but it's there is a big, so in the US, what has happened in the chicken farming is that the companies actually dump their birds to the farmers, and they use the space. The farmer doesn't own the chicken. He has to provide for the chicken, and he's paid based on what how the chicken grows, and they're not
Oh.
allowed to. They have rules that they have to follow. So apparently the chicken grow better if there's no light, natural light. So all these things are things that they have to abide
Oh.
by, and they don't.
Wow.
Who are chicken farmers. So those are things that we have, and creating transparency around.
That is incredible. Literally recording to exact specificity each step of the supply chain, from buyer to initial supplier to the grower even. And I think this is great, especially because I think small business agriculture, small business farmers are probably one of the most overlooked parts of our society. We eat and have access, if you're over here and in many first world countries, we have access to such great food, and it comes from all over the world. However, there are many things that I think, whether you're your average everyday person, or even if you're a party in the, I think, the uh, food supply chain, there are many things that are overlooked. And I think as consumers, there's also many things that we take for granted as well. And I think sustainability is particularly important. And you know what I was always wondering, from reading about AgriLedger this week, do you feel that do you feel like in some ways a country like Haiti could perhaps be more mobile and be in a better position to, let's say, adopt something like this versus, let's say, a first world country that has maybe way more legacy systems in place that have probably been there for about 50 plus years? Because I look at this and I'm like, Haiti, maybe, let's say, despite the issues and obstacles, they could probably be more mobile in terms of maybe adopting certain aspects of blockchain, technology. You're not going to have the bureaucracy, for instance, of, let's say, traditional big banks there, for instance. Things like that. I wanted to know some of your thoughts. That's
So,
just what came to mind when I saw this.
so it's not just Haiti. It's also, so one of the biggest challenges that most people don't realize. Africa, when the World Food FAO speaks about, so this the UN Food and Agriculture Organization speaks about the fact that we're going to need 70% more food. Where that food is going to be needed is mostly in Africa and in Asia, where you have the biggest population growth.
Right.
When we look at Africa, only 10% of arable land, which means land that you can grow things in, is actually being cultivated. So there are swaths
Wow.
of land which are not being cultivated. And part of the challenge, and this is also in Haiti and in other places in the Caribbean, has to do with infrastructure. Uh, Two types of infrastructure. One, obviously, data infrastructure, internet. And I found out today about Starlink, and I'm like
Oh,
totally excited about that. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
that could be the game changer for data, because remember there was a talk about Google and Facebook
Right,
doing the balloons. This one could be the thing, because Elon has been sending those uh, those things into orbits, the satellites into orbit. But that's only part of the problem. The biggest problem is also the road infrastructure, because you may be able to grow something in a very beautiful place, but getting it from point A to point B, where to market, and having the cold storage if it's fruit, or the right
right,
temperature, or the right humidity. So having grain silos, having those kind of things are
right.
important. So yes, like let's say in the fruit. So what I think there is there's an opportunity for those countries to start getting a bigger share of the pie, to allow them to make the changes that are needed. So if I'm basically making money and I'm paying taxes, I will want my my government to do what's necessary, which is
Sure.
to build the roads. And
Right.
if I can't get that done, then you know what is necessary for me. Sorry, sorry.
Oh, no problem.
I apologize. I forgot to close something. Is that we have an opportunity to actually changes. So what we are able to do is allow them to step on the ladder. And you're right, from a systematic standpoint, they need to build new technology. So obviously, eventually they'll want to have their own data center, but you don't need to have your own data
Sure,
center. You can have Amazon and Microsoft Azure or Google right now. But
sure.
as you bring wealth in the country, then you're able to start alleviating yourself of those technology. That is not to say, so I'm going to be, in the US, we have a big problem with the traditionally Black farmers. Many of them throughout the years lost their lands. They were either taken through Jim Crow laws or things like
Right,
that, or they didn't have the right um, deeds, and so people came in and took their land.
right. And legal
And
technicalities, and they were, yeah, lost land in the
so
process. Yeah.
they are, and we like to think, oh, smallholder farming, that's the problem outside of the US. I actually was finding out in the US, 80% of the farms are less than 1.3 acres, which means those are
Wow.
smallholders.
Those are
And
quite small farms. Wow.
yes. And what happens is that the other problem of a small farm is not just the fact that they, that's why some of them go through the whole aspect of doing the farmers market. So there are opportunities with blockchain, I think, with farmers market, creating the trust that is necessary there. But there is another problem, which is they do not have access to capital. They do not have access to working capital. So one of the things that you get with blockchain technology is you get a record of what has
Right,
occurred. You also get an independent review of what the expected yield is on your farm. So
right.
if somebody comes in and say, this is the expected yield, this is organic, this is da da da, then that can be presented to a bank or a financial institution or an investor
Wow.
is necessary to the company. So right now, look at investment in ag, usually for the mega farm or the vertical farms, things that the investor knows my money is sitting in this box. So if we look at farming ag, it's usually those buildings in New Jersey, because now New Jersey is becoming the state
Right.
of indoor farming,
Right. Yeah. It's very true.
or it is a major such as Dole become the biggest. They just announced a merger, which are the biggest company in the world. But you don't
Right.
see
Yeah.
you don't see small farmers receiving the investment. And this is all over the world. It's not just Haiti, it's not just Africa, it's the US, it's Latin America, it's in Europe. And lest we not forget that prior to the pandemic, everybody was in the street in Ireland, in Barcelona, in Belgium. I got stuck in
Yes.
Belgium. In France, all the farmers were protesting that
Wow.
they were not getting a fair share. Now, you have to ask yourself, what is fair? Because if I look and I sold it for $1 and I see it in the store selling for 19, I'm going to make an assumption that somebody's making a lot in between.
Right. Naturally.
And yeah, but there might be a process, there might be a requirement that don't pay, don't take the cost for, that the supplier has to. And mostly in the US, it's onerous. There's so much paperwork that's being done
Right.
because, and this is one of the fundamental challenges in the food industry. It is the least tech oriented as possible.
Right.
They accept SAP, but one of the things that's about to come in, I don't know if you guys realize, yes, sir, the guy who's coming to head the FDA
Oh,
was the
yes.
one
Yes. Yeah.
who did the blockchain project at IBM for Walmart with Walmart.
Right.
So he was at Walmart, he did for IBM. And so one of the rules that's coming in starting in September is basically traceability. And
Yes.
that traceability is going to be a headache for most food companies because they're using SCP traceability.
Right.
Is that giving them a lot number? Yeah, it's giving them the lot number for what they have done. But food companies do not produce, for the most part, the food. A chocolate
Right.
company does not grow chocolate. They they basically
Right.
bake chocolate. They get the chocolate butter, they get the chocolate beans, maybe. Bring that in, they bring sugar, they bring milk, they bring all these things, and they give you bar. Now they have to be able to show that chocolate, that those nuts that they're putting in, where it's coming from. So all those things are going
Sure.
to be an opportunity. Now, obviously, there is so many already non-blockchain solutions, or you have some like GS1, which are working with blockchain organization. But GS1 is only looking at the transportation aspect. It's not looking all the way down to the farmer. So what we did in
Wow.
Haiti for us is really to set the scene, and then now it's about breaking down, so we kind of go, yeah, we know that part happened, but now it's bringing them in. And this is where we're going to see a lot more around AI and machine learning, because I think that what we need to make clear is the data in blockchain is immutable, can't change it.
Yes.
So because you can't change it, even if it's crap and it's a lie, you can now take that lie and put it against whatever is happening and starting to see where are the outliers.
Sure.
Somebody's cheating. So if you're saying that you've got 100 tons and it comes back to the price, or value of 100 tons, but you don't see it and it's ghosted, you can see that when you're comparing it to somebody who's doing. So you start saying those are the points. Also, we can take that data and start creating throughout the value chain learnings. Actually, it's better to go at this time because there's traffic. You always spend 2 or 3 hours between you're burning gas, sitting
Right.
idle. So you can start providing that input. Not to say that it's not possible with non-blockchain, but my point of view is within the next 5 years, I used to say 10 years, now I say 5 years, we are going to be using distributed ledger databases with cryptographic
I
signatures.
I completely agree, and I wanted to know with AgriLedger, what is your company's goals for 2022 and maybe over the next 5 years? Because my feeling is this: First off, I think you should be teaching an economics class. I believe learning about agricultural supply chains is actually something everybody should know. Where their food comes from, how much does it cost during each part of it, and who are the parties in each part of this supply chain. This is a very great piece of, I would say, macroeconomic information. And by the way, this was a major learning experience for me so far. And I think even beyond Haiti, I mean, I would say almost anywhere can use this. Any country with an agricultural sector should be using this, to say the least. And I wanted to know
Yeah,
with AgriLedger.
you know what? My yeah, I've done that. Yes.
Mhm.
Taking so actually some of the what we're doing right now is we are solidifying. We're about to enter into an agreement with a pretty large firm which has a footprint in
Awesome.
Europe and Asia. And they will be working with us because I think one of the challenges is as a startup, you don't have the balance sheet to put up. If you
Right.
think about it, the time to market, mostly for what I do, is, if I go B2B, probably 6 to 9 months, maybe 12, all the way up to 12. There are always going to be other startups who want to use me, but they don't have the ability to pay me. So we need to find
Mm,
companies which have the ability to actually pay. Because what we've also done is we don't do two tiers database. It's everything into chain. Some people say it's crazy, but you know what? If you don't push it, you're never going to achieve it. I remember,
absolutely.
yeah, I remember when Access was the way you did databases. Now Access doesn't exist anymore because SQL has taken over.
Right.
So yeah, and so I was pretty mad until I found Airtable because I needed to do things, and I was like, "Where's Access?"
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
That,
so what happens is that um, where I challenge is we are not trying to be a financial services. We're more trying to help create truth and provide evidence of truth. So I'm looking for the good word, because I think tokenization becoming NFT was the best thing because they made it cute, nifty.
right.
While
That's it's
auditing sounds very heavy and like you're pushing.
right.
No, it's really more. I have to find the word for it, but most blockchain companies have the opportunity to actually provide a view of what's happening, and you have the oracle which are coming in, which can allow for more data, but any decisions that are being made can then be captured in a way where it cannot be lost, and no one can control that information. So for us, what we're looking at is we've said, okay, and I spent the last couple of years really just saying, I'm going to do one client. I'll talk to others. I mean, I did something for silk, I did something for potatoes, wheat, corn. We put it all together to be
Wow.
able to look for grants. And so we have design, coffee, cocoa, all those things, but we haven't implemented IT in the right way. I'm glad to say we had it reviewed and also R3. They came up and said there were a few issues that they wanted us to look at and to fix. And it's less than 10 days of work for the team to do all of them.
Yeah.
So to me, they're not major issues. They class them as major issues. But if you have a full system and you have 6 security issues being highlighted to you, I think you've done pretty well. So now
Right.
that allows us to be able to start expanding and looking at other opportunity, while I think also growing Haiti more, because right now it's not really well understood, and there isn't a marketing. Like the marketing is more from us in the blockchain world who are very intrigued with what I'm doing, and that the words are starting to come out. And
Right.
the other thing is that I do think that there needs to be other people who are doing it, because then that makes you get your game be better. For us, what we think is that we're further down the road and we can continue. Just I make sure I know who's on my rearview mirror, but I don't bother, because if I thought I was the only car on the road, then I'm doing something wrong, because I'm not making
Very
sense.
good point. That's a very good point. And right now, I'd like to open the floor to Christopher Body, our CEO. He is the one who he is the one who is the ideas guy. He created the idea of PiñaPay and one of our upcoming NFT platforms. I know you probably like to talk about that a little bit as well. And Bethany, she is our CTO, so she is the backbone of our tech here. So I know they both are going to have questions regarding technology and maybe some of the little nuances there. So I'd like to open it to both of you right now.
Hi, yes, I'd love to ask a question regarding, again, going back to your, you mentioned that you have a, 5-year goals for your company, AgriLedger. So I wanted to know how, I guess, how has and I know we talked about this a little bit in the past, but how has the global shutdown, I guess, affected your plans? Has it ever, put it to, I guess, the background? Did you have to change your course in any way, shape or form?
Oh my God. Can I start the list? First of all, I had to sit at
Let me
home.
get more of this coffee in.
I had to sit. But aside from sitting, we had opportunities for a grant that we were looking at, and we did a business case, and it would have allowed us to be able to build the system as we wanted. Part of what we did is we built a use case. The Haiti system is a use case, but it's very, in ways, when you're building a use case the first time, you don't create the flexibility in the system to do the what ifs. So my team, we, I mean, this is something I was talking about on Monday, that I had told them, you change this, but now black, but keep the choices, and they didn't keep the choices. So those are things that I want to rectify. In terms of how it's affected us, is the opportunities that we had. We had something in Africa, as I mentioned, and it was looking at being able to expand in Africa. I don't know that Africa is possible before 22, 23. If I had something in Australia also, there is no way anybody is in or out of Australia. Now, we were lucky, we did the whole Haiti remote, so we can do again remote, but it does slow the process if you're doing remote. And then finally, I think in other way, it accelerated, because the fact used to be that companies would send, even if it's a supplying company, a buyer company, they would send their people to go visit the farm, to visit and get information. Now, what happened was that it's like, let's say, I'm going to take the UK as an example. UK has opened itself to the US. Um, People from the US to travel if you're fully vaccinated, but the US is still shut down from anyone with a British passport. So you might be you might be fully vaccinated, your country might allow you to do so, but the country where you need to go will not allow you. Or if you go to that country, you're then forced to go. So let's say if you go to certain countries in Africa, or what they call a red country in the UK, you have to now go into a hotel quarantine at 1750 for 10 days, and you have to prepay that, or you will be fined extra money, double that money, if you walk into the UK without having taken care of it. So that's causing, so if I'm a business and I'm going to send somebody down to go check on the farm, I'm going, and then I have to pay 2,500 for them to come back, and they have to stay at a hotel in London, and I can't use them for 10 days. No, might as well just use different mechanism. So we have become more accepting of things like Zoom calls or video calls. We've also become much WhatsApp. I mean, if they could have meant it as using it as a mean of communication. So that's where I think also then something like blockchain technology. And if we look at what Cardano is doing, Cardano has planted themselves straight into Africa, and they are just basically encroaching there. And now what that means is that they're stuck down there until such time as the world reopens. But that gives you because those who didn't get to go or haven't created a relationship with the people. This is another thing about this technology, I think, which is very important, is you cannot just go in and drop it. You have to get them to own it. If they don't own it, it's like a well. You teach somebody how to build a well, and then suddenly you go away. That 2 years later, that well doesn't exist anymore. They don't. It's not that they don't want the water; they just don't know and they don't
Right.
care.
That is so true. Wow, that's a solid piece of wisdom there, to say the least. Chris?
Yeah, no, I'm very fascinated with everything that you said so far with all of the supply chain. I myself, I've worked in a lot of hospitality roles in restaurants and hotels, and we deal with hundreds of vendors and their supply chain logistics and how they do things, and everybody does things in a different way. And it really needs to be streamlined because a lot of, obviously, a restaurant, you're getting foods and things of that nature, and you want to know where it came from, especially with the farm to table movement and making sure there's no nuts for people with allergies. And there's so many things that you need to know about the food and where it came from. And a lot of, like you said, the technology is not there for food. It's very antiquated. As a business operator, I could see much improvement for the efficiency of doing this digitally, where things can come in and it's more or less automated. There's not so much accounting and middlemen on the back end with paperwork and did that come in, the inventory and the signing off, and it's redundant, and there's a lot of paperwork for something to go from China to here if it's like a piece of garlic. And the amount of paperwork for that is not really worth what the piece of garlic is worth value to what it's bringing. So there's a lot of inefficiencies, there's a lot of waste, and I commend you for trying to tackle this area because it's a difficult one. Supply chain is something that can definitely benefit from blockchain technology and being able to use oracles to make sure that things are kept at certain temperatures and make sure things are automated, and using automation to use to perform certain tasks that are redundant, that don't really necessarily need to be done by a human, and just make it much more efficient and much more
Robust.
quick. Like, yeah, exactly. More robust and transparent as well. Like being able to track everything from literally from farm to table. I think it's amazing.
So one of the ways, and being Piña Pay, you probably understand that also. It's so I don't like to call it supply chain. I call it value chain.
Yep.
When you look at a value chain, it's not about just the movement of the thing, but what's in it for each of us which are touching it. How does it affect us? How do we get incentivized to do the right thing? My point of view is, and this is my point of view, is that there are some bad people, but most people are not there trying to commit fraud. They commit fraud because they feel that what they're receiving is not a fair and equitable share. So if you feel that what you're getting is not fair, you then try to even out what it is that you believe you should be getting. So that could be doing some changes and things like that. So if we can then create to where there's an equitable distribution of wealth, not only do we then create better peace among everybody, but also we can, my biggest worry, is food out of the lab. I know some people are, like the Beyond Burgers and things like that. But I'm worried as a former biochemist. Like, what happened if the system goes wrong? And
Right.
it's not
Yeah.
It's not because it's in a lab that the food safety issue combated. And also, how do I know that it has all the nutrient? We're fabricating things now. So is it another form of GMO, but now in a different format? So we need two things. We need that to have natural food. And if we think about what Sir David Attenborough has been talking about,
Oh, yeah.
the whole green, we need to go back to regenerative agriculture, which means that we need to encourage those smallholder farmers to continue with their traditional ways of doing things, because that's what's going to make sure that we don't deplete the green gas. And so there's it from food waste. And can you believe the globally of green gas depletion due to food waste, which is
Wow.
temperature and transportation is 16%. So, I mean, and when you're talking transportation, you're talking planes and everything else also. So we have to figure out a way to save our planet. I think that the pandemic gave us a time to regenerate and to rethink and to really look at how we could approach things. And it also gave better acceptance and, I would say, technical literacy to many.
Yes.
And I was a conversation with someone who apparently has been following me for a while, but I hadn't met. Knows him on Facebook. I didn't work with him, and he said, we're doing the technology for the young people. I said, no. It doesn't need to be only the young people. And I showed him a picture of the cryptograms that I took in Macau about 2017.
Macau.
You should see these like old ladies with these granny like totally granny,
Right.
like 80-year-old trading bitcoins.
Wow.
It was a Bitcoin conference, and they were there. I mean, like there was like a
It's for
line
everybody,
of
truly.
them, and they were like platinum members. And so I do think we need to maybe cover a little bit around the crypto, what's happening in the crypto space. Mostly, with what's happening with the tokenization, the NFT, the challenges that I see going that. And then we talked a little bit about El Salvador also.
I was actually just about to ask you about that, the significance of El Salvador. I remember when we spoke, when we had our phone call a few weeks ago. I wanted to know your thoughts on El Salvador's significance of mass Bitcoin adoption, and because there's a fair amount of retractors, as there are many people who look at this as a very promising, optimistic event. You could say there's just as many detractors, even here in the U.S. You turn on the news, anything crypto related, you will find people who will try to understate the significance of El Salvador. And it seems like El Salvador may be a beacon for developing countries, as far as, or even if it's just a test run. Effectively, listen, let's say mass adoption of Bitcoin. Successful or unsuccessful, ultimately, you can learn from whatever ends up happening and tinker it and toggle it to essentially the needs of your own ecosystem and country. So I want to know what your thoughts were on El Salvador this year.
So El Salvador, I think that they didn't, it doesn't matter. It's 1.5 million people. It's not that big. And they didn't have their own currency to begin with. So for them to go to Bitcoin makes sense. It's like you ain't doing a lot of problem with them because the IMF then turned around and loaned and blah, blah, blah. So, there is a certain amount of lack of control that comes in with Bitcoin. I think that for me, it's an asset. I don't see it as a currency. But what happens is that an asset, though, based on value, can be used as a mechanism of exchange. So, we need to really, what's money? Money is also an asset. So, when I first started journey, I used, sometimes I still do when I'm talking, depending on the financial, who I say, I take an asset from the farmer, I escrow it to somebody who's carrying it for him, and then I do an asset transfer from that asset food item to a new asset, which is money. And then there is an asset termination that happens because somebody consumes it or it goes bad, but that asset is no longer in circulation. And that's kind of what happens with money. The fundamental difference with also Bitcoin is that it doesn't go away unless you forget what your passwords is, or
Right.
you die without telling your next of kin how much you have. So those are, it's like you have, and it's the same thing as somebody who buries their money or their gold in their backyard and doesn't tell anybody, and that gold is gone forever until somebody breaks it. Only thing is, with this one, you can't break it. It's gone, done, story over. So I think with El Salvador, what it will do is that it will herald one of the biggest things that we've been missing, which is proper UI and UX. The user experience and user interfaces have gotten better. I'm going to say that, but they still suck. So I have experience of selling Bitcoin through somebody in a parking lot where somebody's bringing cash and you're bringing your wallet to exchange.
Wow.
I mean, we no longer have to do that because we got enough
Right.
exchanges to do this.
Honestly, I imagine this almost like a scene out of a movie right now.
It is like a movie.
Yeah.
That's why people think, is this why people think it's a drug deal? Because it's exactly like a drug
Exactly what I
deal.
was thinking.
And
That
then,
is
the guy
awesome.
comes in and say, you say, this is what we agreed to, but because you know that he's, that was the Bitcoin, you would go on and you try and find a match because that was the only
Right.
way you could get your money. Nowadays, with better understanding and regulatory, it's still horrendous. It's a pain in the ass, so basically, to do it, but at least you can go to exchanges and there are now rules that take place. But I was talking to a friend of mine, Linda Getz. I don't know if you know Linda. She's amazing.
Actually going to be a guest in a few weeks. Actually,
Perfect.
I know Linda Getz very well. Yes.
So Linda,
she's wonderful.
You need to. I won't spoil, but ask Linda to tell you how she bought her first Bitcoins.
Oh.
It was.
Will.
It is almost like a drug deal because you had to write a little piece of paper. You had to go. You gave your money, and she explained it. And I was like, I would have given up. And that was my whole thing. When I could have gotten Stellar coins, and I was like, I don't understand this. I'm not interested.
Sure.
And it was just really the coins. It's a straight through process. And holding coins at a penny and having them to go to 129 at some point. But this is basically, even we've gone away from the coin drops. So the early adopters, but we like to think that we are big. We're not. I think we're less than 1%, which understand Bitcoin or cryptocurrency or crypto anything. Obviously, you always had those cryptographers which knew the system, but they were using it for digital identity or for NASA and those kind of things, not for creating a means of exchange. Now, what I think, so going back to El Salvador, what I think it's going to do is now you have 1.5 million people who do not have a say, let's say that I believe in this libertarian way. It's more, I have been given a piece of gold that I can exchange, that I can buy something with, that I can make money with, that I can sit on and let it grow. So that's where you're igniting the mind. And so you're bringing it into a part of the society who may not have been exposed. Because I'm actually very surprised sometimes that I'm talking to CTOs who have no clue what blockchain is. Or they say, why do you need distributed ledger technology? You already have distributed database. And I'm like,
it's like, do I really have patience for this right now? Do I really have time for this right now?
Not necessarily interchangeable, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Bethy, I'm sure you want to chime in here, right?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, I think that this is a really great point because we really want to, we want to get, although we want to get more early adapters, how do we get, I guess, how are you tackling the efforts to get more reception to, particularly with AgriLedger? So, how are you doing that? Are you trying to, I guess, I know you're engaging with different companies. Are you trying to engage with governments at this point or in the near future?
Yeah, no. So I have engaged with governments in the past. I've engaged with AfricSim, which is the Africa Import-Export Bank, and I did for them about a year ago a paper which talked about, when we look at Africa, 16% of the revenue for Africa is actually around agriculture. It is higher than what the revenue is for oil in terms of dollar value. However, that isn't to say that they're getting a fair price, that the full value that they should be getting.
Wow.
So there's, like I say, if we look at a country like Mali, which has a 60% business, the cotton in Mali is sold out from Mali, goes to India, is now made in, or Bangladesh, made into clothes and cloth, which is then sold back at a higher price to Africa. So isn't there an opportunity using the AFCA, which is the African Free Trade Agreement, to actually do interchange around the African countries to where you're not doing that exposure? And usually the exposure is also in USD, not in their local currency, which means there is a FX exposure that comes into place. So there is a lot that government can do. And one of the things that I'm also advocating for is, because you're using a mechanism to now reappropriate money back into the country, the exporter doesn't have the ability to leave some of that money outside, because you now have visibility on how much is coming in, which means you can tax that amount. So that means that revenue can actually be attributed, and you're not looking at so you kind of start stopping the black market. So one of the Asian countries that we're looking to talk to has this issue with subsidies that they're providing, and then the sellers are actually telling them that they're selling more to get more subsidies, and a lot of it is also going out to the black market. So there is, one of the questions that you had asked was why the difference also versus a developed country versus a developing economy. What are the challenges? Lack of governance in developing economy, which are usually around government or structural aspect of the governance, causes that there are not rules and people create their own rules. Versus in places like Europe and America, or even in China, they are retribution for not following the rules. You're going to go to jail. You're going to, in China, they'll kill you.
Right.
So all those things cause that there are consequences for acting properly. Also, we don't take and tax. We're actually bad at that. We don't tax enough the people who make the most money. We tax more the lower people, versus
Right.
in many of those countries, people don't want to make money because they're the one who are going to pay taxes. So
Right, which is why all the Chinese billionaires keep going to US or Canada or Australia.
yeah, so you need to
Yeah.
rebalance these things. And I think that the technology gives you an opportunity to do that. So you were asking Bethany, what am I doing? So one of the things I've done is I've actually partnered with Consensus Academy last year, and they issued 10 scholarship in Haiti and 10 in South Africa. This year they've given us 40, and what we've done is we have gone with the bigger pie for women in blockchain, for them to take that course and upskill themselves in Solidity. Well,
Wow.
AgriLedger doesn't use Solidity, but I don't care what you learn. At the end of the day, you will now start understanding how does this technology work. You'll then understand what, sometimes I get frustrated trying to explain what's the difference between Ethereum versus Bitcoin versus, whatever other platform, and what Corda brings in difference. What's the difference between Hyperledger? Most people sort of like say open mission or, open, and, they don't understand. They go smart contract. I'm like, smart contract doesn't equal smart contract, smart contract. Depending on how the ability of that smart contract, and what are you doing? Are you doing a transfer of value, or are you just keeping information and making decision on information is really what needs to happen. So until we have more people who understand the possibility of the technology, which is beyond the cryptocurrency, we then do not have the ability to look at the mass adoption. And in reality, we don't need everybody to understand the nitty-gritty of the technology, because most people don't understand email. Do you know what email does? Nah. You just know that I put an email address and it comes to me. What people don't realize that at the beginning, there was one address for the whole company. Now we can create additional address. We can create sample. And this is one of the things I see coming into the blockchain space also. I no longer need to give you this long ass email my wallet. I can give you a has my name. So I choose. So those are things that I see coming in. And what I think has been great about the pandemic is we had a lot of time to think. So there's a lot of great ideas who are going to come out. There's going to be a lot of shitty ideas also. I'm like, Jesus
Oh yeah.
Christ. I always
I think we've seen a few, right, team? I think we've seen a few of those shitty ideas out there.
Yeah, and it's I think that it takes crazy ideas to make things work. I think the person who started the whole Bitcoin craze must have thought it's kind of crazy, it's not going to work. And many people say it didn't work. And you're going to get naysayers. And when people don't understand something, they say it's shit.
Right.
I don't.
Right.
Instead of saying I don't understand, I want to learn more about it. They go, it doesn't work. It's going to fail. It may fail, but it also has an opportunity to improve, and that's what we need to go after.
That's wonderful. And you know what? I think this is a great note to end this live stream on. Listen, Genevieve, it was an absolute pleasure having you on today. I feel like I learned so much. I wish this was taught in my law and economics class, actually, both in law school and in undergrad. So learning about the supply chain and these parties and counterparties, this was a great experience for me. I am very bullish on your company, so to say, and we have a few projects in the works. I would love nothing more maybe to hop on a call with you maybe in 60 days, and maybe we can see
no, we're not hopping on a call. I'm coming
Oh,
to New
that's
York.
right. You're coming. Right. That's right.
I'm coming. So we're going down to the Korean restaurant.
Right. Just for some context, where I live literally in the middle of Koreatown in northern New Jersey. So we have really all the best Korean barbecue, bubble tea places. And before that, in the 80s and 90s, it was all Japanese here. So a lot of those old, you could say old school traditional Japanese restaurants, they're still here as well. So, listen, if you're looking for great Korean or Japanese food, my neck of the woods is certainly the place. And Genevieve, you definitely impressed me with your local knowledge. A lot of people would not necessarily know that. So you got to let me know.
Yes.
I love, and I'm going to tell you which one, restaurant. Basically, I come in and she says, "You're back in town." I make sure the first stop make is that restaurant. And before I leave, and this time around, I went and got some, froze it, and brought it to Europe with me.
Oh,
it's the chicken with the red sauce, yeah. So around the 15th of September, we have a date.
All right, yeah, let us know. Yeah, for sure.
Bethany, come up. Come and see us from Texas. And by the way, as I say, all power to you, my sister. I love the fact that you're a CTO. I want to see more women in technology.
Yes, thank you so much.
Technology. Yes.
Actually, I've been following you for, I think, over a year now on LinkedIn. I think this is our first time actually engaging. So I'd love, likewise, like Adam, I'd love to connect with you individually and just, pick your brain as well. Thank you.
Definitely. I would love that. And then, as I said, I've got 20 girls who are looking for an opportunity to be providing support. Because I want, so the idea is to create more women in technology. And it's not just building, it's also the business. If your business analyst doesn't understand the technology, you're lost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well,
Yes.
Bethany, it looks like you could be our point person on this. As far as
Yeah.
I think this would be great.
Wonderful. So I look forward to it.
Yes.
Absolutely, we do
Thank
too.
you so much.
Thank you so much,
It was a
Genevieve.
pleasure.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. It's a
See you in
pleasure.
Bye.
September.
Bye. See you in September.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.